Remember who you are, they cry. I did not think I'd have to try. Time Not Here, Chapter 9. Geez, that's intense, Sam said when Daniel told him the next afternoon. Talk about the wounded soldier routine. And the way he said, anything? That's messed up, man. That is not a normal person. And who hurts themselves to bleeding point just to try to get a rise out of someone? A psychopath, Sam laughed. He was trying to raise Daniel's spirits, knowing how traumatizing that confrontation had been for him. But look, I think you might be in a better position than ever. I think you did exactly what you should have done. Wait, what do you mean? Now he knows for sure that he's lost control over me. Surely that means he's going to lash out next. Not exactly. For two reasons. One, he still wants to stay in the house, which we know he can't do if you don't pay the rent. Two, you told him you don't believe him. But you didn't say about what. You didn't tell him that you know, for instance, that bailiffs probably weren't real and that he used the cat to try to get money out of you. How can anyone poison their own cat? Daniel sighed in horror. But he doesn't know that you know he did that. All he knows is that you don't believe something. It will be sending him nuts trying to figure it out. He is not going to like that you are doubting the truth that he presents to you, and is probably asking himself which of the many lies you're now suspicious of. He knows you're not going to tell him, so unless you do, he'll not want to drop any clues about any one of the lies. In case that's not the one that you already know about. Make sense? Sort of. Do you mean if he said to me, is it about the cat being sick, and it wasn't about the cat being sick, then he'll have just told me that he lied about the cat being sick and given himself up even more? Exactly. By staying quiet, he gets to stay in the house longer and can hope to himself that you change your mind after enough time has passed. Sam took out his tobacco and started rolling. Do you want one? Hell yes, Daniel said, then drifted off in thought over the implications. After a while, he asked Sam, do you think he'll leave? I hope so, but for now, just keep avoiding him. Don't give him any information to work with. Leave him confused and trying to figure out what's going on. So, he did. Much to his surprise, that night was the last time Daniel saw Lath for more than a few seconds when they crossed paths, each man blankly walking past with no effort to say hello or keep up any sort of pretense. He barely said a word to the man for 6 beautiful weeks. Having made so much money over the 2 weeks before Christmas, when customers are both more numerous and generous than usual, he decided to take a trip somewhere to get some headspace. Somewhere in nature would be perfect, where he could think and reflect on it all, while getting some much-needed rest. He felt ashamed for having to compromise his values in dealing with Lath, lying himself and refusing to offer compassion, and for being too much of a coward to do much more than stand there, shaking when confronted. Whatever happened next, he needed to get well. He felt so weak and fearful in Lath's presence. That had to change if he was going to survive this. He almost wished that Lath would attack him finally. At least then he could rely on his strength and force of will to defend himself. The emotional manipulation and the psychological games, that just left him confused and defenseless. This was far harder to deal with than a real physical fight between two men, and was lasting for far longer. He knew that Lath knew this. Whatever happened next, he needed to get well. He felt so weak and fearful in Lath's presence, and that had to change if he was going to survive this. Before he knew it, the week he'd booked off work had come. Without a word to Lath, he'd hired a car and drove 3 hours north towards the beautiful Lake District of Cumbria. Crags and valleys abounded, and stunning views were given an even more breathtaking dimension by the light dusting of a January snowfall. He checked into a hostel, a warm Victorian-era mansion, complete with fireplaces and wide views of the area surrounding the small town of Grasmere. Or Grasmere, depending on where you're from. Not wanting to speak to anyone, he spent the evening reading quietly by the fire, before planning a hike for the next day. He set off early in the morning on the hike that supposedly took 6 hours. He didn't bring a map of any kind, despite the snow and hail that was predicted for the day, and the associated dangers of being alone on a mountain. Hell, if he survived the whole fake mugging thing, he could survive some snow. The hike took him about 10 hours in the end. Lots of quiet moments staring out across the valleys as hail stung his face, enjoying the warmth of his coffee while taking shelter in a cave, feeling the window of calm when snow would stop and the wind would go silent. When Daniel was 18, he'd acquired a bug for travel that later drove him to start his own business. How better to fund adventure than becoming rich through a successful business? But in all the chaos involved in actually starting a business and the subsequent catastrophe when it failed, this was actually the first time he had done anything remotely like travel in years. What happened, he wondered, that so diverted him from his path? The drugs hadn't helped, the depression certainly played its part, and of course, in the last 5 years, he'd been listening to a snake, whispering in his ear, Lathe, who took pleasure in causing him misery. Hell, he may well have contributed to the depression, caused it even. Once he had made it back to the hostel, he looked down at his boots. They were wet and muddy from the hike, yet they felt as strong and sturdy as the day he'd bought them almost a decade ago. Those boots had taken him